My name is Harish Menon. I'm a program manager here with Power Automate. Today, I wanted to show you how you can use Power Automate to automate routine tasks and processes across the suite of Microsoft 365 apps and services. Today, I'll be walking you through a simple demo of how you can use flows to automate topic collections from various different sources, create approvals for those topics, as well as add users or speakers for those topics into a specific team, helping them get started for their webinar, and so that they have all the necessary content for them to get going. All of these will be totally automated so that you don't have to do much as once you set up these processes. So let's see how that goes. So here in Teams, we have two main teams that we're dealing with. One is the webinar organizing team, and the one is the webinar topics team. The process that we're trying to set up is we're trying to send a form across to our entire company to collect topics for a specific webinar. And once a topic is submitted, we want to start off an approval process here in the topic submissions channel so that we can get a good, rich set of topics that people might want to talk about in our upcoming webinar. Once a webinar topic is approved, we want to add people to a specific team and also create the necessary files and welcome them into the team so that they have everything for them to get started with doing the best job possible. All right, so to do that, let's look at the different flows we've set up for this particular topic. First, we have a basic form collection flow. So you can see here, I have a Power Automate flow setup that looks for responses for a specific form. In this case, I have a webinar volunteer topic submissions form. It gets the necessary details and runs a bunch of actions to automate our entire process. So first, it gets the response details, gets who the user is who submitted this particular form's response. It creates an approval for that user and also posts it to the channel, in this case, our topic submissions channel, waits for an approval. And once it's approved, it basically notifies the user as well as creates an item in a particular SharePoint list that basically is aggregating across all the different topics and keeping a tab of what are the different topics that we use in this particular web. Once this is done, we also have an associated flow that looks at that particular list and adds people to the team. So the first thing it does here is whenever an item is created in our webinar topics SharePoint, we get the user details and we add that user into the team along with their ID. And more importantly, we also actually create a Word file for them to get started on for their webinar topic. So it also pre-populates things like what the webinar title is, what the overview is, everything coming from our original form that the user might have submitted at the start of this process. And once that's done, it creates a file in the necessary folder, and so that people are ready to go. And then in order to welcome people into the team, whenever a new member is added to this team, we basically post a card asking them to give a little bit of information about themselves so that we can appropriately send a message in a channel. It gets the necessary details as part of this adaptive card that's posted within Teams, and then sends a message into the welcome channel telling all the other speakers that hey, there's a new speaker in this particular channel. And our last flow is basically a manually triggered flows right from within Teams to help users get support if they're running into issues as part of using our different folders and so on and so forth. So you can see here, I've set up a very basic form right within Power Automate that collects a title for the issue as well as details and submits that into a process, and it creates a task that our support team can then look at and triage and help them get. It also posts a message into a channel so everybody's notified what the issue is, so that if others are facing similar issues, they know that there's something going on and they can tag onto the task that was created in this particular case. So that's the description of the different processes, but let's look at how that actually functions on a day-to-day basis and by kicking off this form. Over here, I'm logged in as Lee, who wants to submit a topic for our particular webinar. So we've circulated this webinar topics form for collecting this information from our different members within the team. So Lee comes in here and he can give a topic for this and even give it a small description. Once I'm happy with the title and description for my form, I can just hit submit. And now this triggers our entire process that we spoke about earlier. So let's look at that in action. You can see here my first process, which is to start an approval when a new form's response is submitted, has started running, and it's about 27 seconds ago. This is triggered by the form that Lee submitted in this case. In this particular case, I am the creator of this flow, so I'm just showing you a behind-the-scenes view of what this would look like. Coming back to Teams, though, you can see as part of that form submission, it actually created an approval and sent this through into our topic submissions channel. So you can see here there's a new forms request requested by Lee, the date in which it was created, as well as the details of the submission. So including things like what Lee entered as the title for this particular topic, as well as the description that Lee entered. So I can come in here, I can decide whether I want to approve or reject this particular topic. And not only is it present here as part of the topic submissions page, even if you go into our native approvals app within Teams, you will see that you have the approval that was submitted just now, sent by Lee Gu, waiting for approval or rejection. So from here or from within the topic submissions channel, you can actually act on this particular approval and kick off the rest of the processes in this particular queue. So here, I think this is a great topic. So I'm going to submit an approval for this and say, hey, this looks great, and hit submit. And this then kicks off the rest of the process, which is to create a particular SharePoint list item, as well as to add Lee in this particular case to the webinar topics team. Once the approval is submitted, the card updates itself along with the information of what the response was, as well as the comments from the approver. And so you always have an audit trail of who did what and what topics were approved as part of this topic submission channel. So if I go back into my flow for a second, you can actually see if I click through into the flow. One of the great things about Power Automate is actually you can see an entire history of what happened in a particular flow run. So you can see here a forms response was submitted. It got the details from the user, including things like the title and short description and so on, and actually walk through the entire process. So we even have a condition in here for approval and rejection. And you can see here, it went into the approval path, applied all the necessary processes, got the details, as well as created the item in that SharePoint list, which will trigger our next set of flows in this case. You can see here that we already have a successful flow running. This is the whole idea with it being productive. 9 seconds ago, we have the add speaker to a team flow that completed. So if I click in here, you will get the details of that particular run as well, which is in this case, it got the new item, got the details of the user that was responsible for the speaking, which is Lee in this case, and then added them to the team as well as created a file for them. So let's look at Lee's point of view for this. As you can see here, there's a couple of notifications waiting for Lee in his Teams instance, which is one that the webinar topic that he submitted for approval has been approved. So he can actually see who approved it, what the comments were, and so on. So he has a view of what happened to his particular forms request as well. And more importantly, he's also been added newly to this webinar topics channel. So he's in the team for him to get started with all the different topics, etc. Not only that, as part of the flow, like I said, we are also creating a file. So if I go into my general channel and go into the files folder, you can see here within the topics folder, there's a new file that's been created 2 minutes ago, which is titled already with the author, in this case, Lee Gu, as well as the topic that he's speaking on. In fact, even if I click into this particular file, it's not only created the file, it started off by populating some of the parameters within the file as well. So you can see from the forms response, the topic title that Lee has entered has been brought in here, as well as details about the session and the description that he had entered as part of the form. So you can see everything that Lee needs to get started is already here for him to get going. As part of getting added to this webinar topics channel, if you remember, we've also set up a welcome process for getting folks acquainted with the new team. And there's a new message here that's come in from the Power Automate bot asking them for information about themselves. So as part of welcoming them to the team, we're just getting some basic information about Lee and his past work experience so that we can welcome him appropriately into the team. So once Lee is happy with the little intro that he's presented, he can hit submit, and that kicks off the rest of the process, including sending a little welcome message into our team so that everybody's aware that Lee is now part of this team. So you can see here, I've got the notification. So if I go directly into that, there's a little welcome message along with a little gift to welcome Lee into his team, as well as like mentioning Lee and adding the message that he sent as part of his card. You could even customize this further by including information like, hey, for things like support topics, files, folders, if there's a wiki that your team is using, you can modify this particular message so that Lee has everything he needs to get started. And if you remember, we had set up a fourth flow. So for our last demo, let's look at how you can manually trigger a process from within Teams to get support for a particular issue that Lee might be facing as part of joining this new team. So you can see here in any new conversation box, we have a new entry point here for workflows, which allows you to kick off manually triggered flows from within Teams. When you come in here, you can see it fetches the flows from Power Automate. In this case, we've created a create an issue manual flow that I've shown before. And when I click into it, since this is the Lee's first time using this particular flow, it signs Lee into the necessary services for him to kick off this flow. Once Lee's signed into the necessary services as part of that first page, he gets the form that we've set up for collecting support tickets issues. What this lets you do is collect detailed information in a way that is structured. So if you wanted to get support ticket information, etc., you can specify a form with different details like priorities, etc., and dates and severities and so on. But in this case, I've kept it fairly simple. You can just have a title and description. So I can say things like submit. And that goes ahead and creates a support ticket, but also notifies this particular team that a webinar topic has been created along with a task ID if they ever want to like come back and reference this issue again. Switching context, and if I'm coming into my administrator view, who is part of the webinar organizing team, the issue that Lee just submitted as part of the support channel is already present here in our issue tracker planner tab. So if I go into issue tracker, you can see here the issue that Lee submitted, unable to access webinar site, has already been created as a to-do item. You can even include details here if you wanted to, like things like a link back to Lee's message or who created it and so on and so forth, or even assign it directly to a particular person as part of the creation process. I've kept it fairly simple by just creating the task, but with all the different actions present within Power Automate, the word is your oyster. So as you can see there, we've automated our entire topic submission process, combining signals from forms, from SharePoint, from Teams, creating Word files, entirely using Power Automate so that you can be more productive in your day-to-day work. For more information, be sure to check out our links below for Power Automate documentation as well as learning guides. And be sure to check out our Power Automate community at community.powerautomate.com for help and for learning new tips and tricks that our community is coming up with on a daily basis for creating flows, managing flows, debugging flows, and so on.